Seems like it's now easier than ever to find another tank control survival horror game. The thing is, even if it's largely meant to draw in die-hard fans of the classic era of Resident Evil and other standout survival horror franchises, the issue is that the quality doesn't go hand in hand with the quantity. I'm sure most die-hard fans of the classic era of survival horror know that a lot more went into some of these games besides tank controls and horror. Thankfully, Flesh Made Fear also knew that. Right from the beginning, I was drawn in by its great artwork. It reminded me of early 2000s PS1 graphics for games such as Fear Effect. What I liked about the artwork was that it was very expressive and haunting. It also helped that there was a lot of variety when it came to the rooms and how they looked. I'm sure that a lot of time and effort goes into not only designing rooms/buildings in a game, but to also make it so that they're visually impressive and interesting to explore. That's more to appreciate. What's cool about this attention to detail is that even if some of the buildings/places in FMF aren't much to look at, they're much more intricate than they appear to be. For example, a cabin with a lot of space and twists and turns. I ended up feeling like there's more to explore than there really is, but also like I'm defending myself from harm by not jumping at the first new door I encountered. It's understandable why that would be a thing, seeing as how survival is the first word in survival horror, but I like how the devs for FMF understood that there's a lot that goes into deciding what and where to explore, even in an enclosed space like a cabin. In continuing to discuss attention to detail, FMF has great camera angles. A part that some, including myself, appreciate about survival horror were the pre-rendered backgrounds. They were a great way of making it so that a game could stand out, and that was made even better when great angles/camera work was there as support. Great angles/camera work can add a lot to whatever's being focused on. Not only does it literally show you something, how it goes about doing that can affect your interpretation. That's especially clear for media within the horror genre. Simply put, the camera angles in FMF were sometimes unnerving. I don't get motion sickness or anything like that from playing games, and yet some of the angles left me feeling like I was sitting at a slant. You could say that the devs went a bit overboard with this part of FMF, so even if I largely enjoyed this, for some it might negatively affect their experience. It's clear that FMF was heavily influenced by Resident Evil, but something that stood out to me was how its early game kept me wondering when the first enemy encounter would take place. It's because of how long it took to happen. With the first Resident Evil games, the first enemy encounters are within the first 5 minutes. I realize some might say, well, FMF isn't Resident Evil, but at the same time, it markets itself by saying that it brings back the survival horror mechanics. This connects to my next point, which is that it could have featured more gameplay. I'm sure that there are reasons as to why this was done, but early on there's a moment in which a bridge falls apart and you automatically get across it. I would have liked that to have been a playable moment, kind of like a QTE from Resident Evil 4, or at the very least like when you would have to dodge boulders in Resident Evil 1's underground area. Besides that, I also noticed that there was an imbalance between general enemies and special ones. When I say special, I mean enemies that are like lickers or hunters. One enemy like this, which I'm fairly sure was called a Shrieker, was made out to be like a licker, and yet I took it out pretty quickly. Surprisingly, groups of zombies were a lot worse to deal with. That led to me thinking that it's possible to die too easily, and that there were quality of life issues that made me think less of FMF. One of these involved getting stuck in corners, or just in general when fighting enemies and bosses. That was especially noticeable when having to deal with one of many groups of zombies. They're slow walkers, so that makes it possible for you to dodge and run away, but that wasn't always possible. Sometimes I'd encounter them in tight spaces that forced me to do more besides run away. I'd usually just try to take a few out with whatever weapons I had available, but since running low/out of ammo would occasionally happen, I couldn't fall back on that each time. That's one of the reasons why I relied on the knife as often as I did. It was great that the knife was actually useful, but sometimes I thought that it was too overpowered. It also didn't help that it functioned like it belonged in a samurai/ninja game instead of in a survival horror one. I'd say that's more of a nitpick on my part, but I'm the kind of player that wants different mechanics to gel together. It probably seems weird to be that specific with a perceived issue, but at the same time, there were other small aspects of FMF that helped and made it more forgiving. 2 examples immediately come to mind. 1. I enjoyed being able to reload in multiple ways. I didn't always feel forced to reload while in the middle of a nerve-wracking enemy encounter. The times that did happen were usually because I forgot how much ammo I had left, so the reload animation would automatically occur. When that wasn't the case, I could just reload in the menu and go back to combat without having to deal with more added stress. I also appreciated how FMF made use of supplies in boss rooms. With earlier survival horror games, you had to make do with whatever you had before you entered a boss encounter. In FMF, I sometimes felt encouraged to go up against bosses because I knew there would be something to replenish my supplies. Whether it was ammo and or health items, I didn't feel like FMF was imbalanced when it came to that. With FMF being a survival horror game, it's clear that puzzles and other similar activities would be a big part of it. I liked that there was a good variety of puzzles, and it was nice that they were different from one another. There was one type that ended up being repeated throughout FMF, but I'm pretty sure that it's because it was optional and was meant as cool minigames for those hoping to get more lore from FMF. I also liked what seemed to be a clear homage to Resident Evil 1, being able to complete side quests to save team members or to get stronger weapons. Not only did this add more content, it made it so that your efforts were properly rewarded. Flesh Made Fear isn't just another of the many recent entries into the survival horror genre. It's a game that builds upon its influences while also attempting to do its own thing. I'm sure that's the goal for most of the recent indie survival horror games, but the issue is whether they manage to do that and deliver an enjoyable experience. I'm happy to say that Flesh Made Fear accomplished that. It's not an instant classic that I'll rank alongside the classic Resident Evil games or Silent Hill 2. I enjoyed the time I spent playing it, flaws and all. Also, if your game manages to leave me wanting to replay it with a different playable character, chances are it managed to do something right. It's possible that all the other scenario has to offer is more of the same as what I already experienced, but from having played Flesh Made Fear, chances are that there's more to be uncovered, even if only slightly. Flesh Made Fear is a pretty niche game. It's clearly meant for fans of classic survival horror, so I don't see it being embraced by general gaming fans. While that may be true, it's still worth giving a try if you happen to be interested by anything that I discussed or showcased here. What are your thoughts on optional content in a survival horror game? Do you have any experiences with general enemies being harder to overcome than bosses? What's an opinion you have about games that you would consider to be a nitpick? If you enjoyed this content, please feel free to like, comment, subscribe, and share. Thank you very much for watching.